spirit one with me. You stand by the ocean, your eyes see everything. Of your motion can make the continents ring. Yet in all your might and glory, vanished from the sky. It's just another story. This means man-made life. Because of how you fell from the sky.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And, well, I just got back. My guest today is supposed to be Bob Chapman. I've sent him an email, and I'm waiting for him to call in right now. But I got to take a nice ride. Almost like back in time yesterday. Went down to Fort Huachuca, Sierra Vista. Rode on out to Bisbee, came back through Tombstone. Walked down Allen Street. A lot of history there. A lot of history in Cochise County. And while I was down in Bisbee, I met with the sheriff. That's Larry Devers, is the sheriff of Cochise County. And it was an interesting situation because I designed this. They really wanted to do this run to get support for Sheriff Devers because he's on the border and the illegal situation is really making people uncomfortable, especially with our own government arming the drug gangs down there with automatic weapons. Bob Chapman, are you with me, sir?
Yes, my son.
How are you, sir?
I'm a little older than I was last month.
God, you know that keeps happening to me.
In 2 months, I'm going to be 76.
Well,
actually, a month and a half. I mean, you talk about old.
Well, you're holding up pretty well, Bob. But let me ask you now. The sheriff of Cochise County, we've met twice now, and the first time he asked me to put together a motorcycle event in Cochise County to get support, and he really wanted to bring the attention to call attention to the illegal situation. But every time I brought it up in mixed company, and that would be bikers, you know, they got upset about it. It's like, oh well, Devers is a racist. Well, you're a racist. Well. Now, this is an invasion, in my opinion. This is something that's you know, got a lot more implications here, and especially with this arming of the drug gangs down there by Operation Fast and Furious. A few heads are rolling, but probably not the right heads. What's your take on what's happening here? This is a border issue. I'm going to bring it. And when I met with the sheriff yesterday, I've got a flyer up on my site. He just wanted to make it a little bit more to the point that what we need here in Cochise County and in Pima County is more enforcement of our borders. What's your situation, Bob? This is balkanization of America. This is the North American Union. This is Otsalon. This is the plan for Otsalon, and they're carrying it out to perfection. And the media is on their side, it seems.
Well, you know, Otsalon was financed with other groups starting in the late 1950s by the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations. And they're basically communist movements. They started off by a man named Reyes Tijerina. And
Of course, we had that other fellow up in the valley unionizing everybody and essentially putting farmers and growers of all kinds out of business. But and I lived in California for a long time, so I'm very familiar with this. The federal government obviously wants cheap labor in the United States, and they want to eventually put all these people who were once illegals on the tax rolls, federal and statewide, and get them paying Social Security. I don't know what the percentages are, but I do know in Southern California about 15% pay taxes and 85% don't, and they make up about 35% of the population. And they draw against the services that are available in a big way, and it's caused many, many hospitals to shut down because, you know, these people come in, they treat them, and then they never get paid by anybody, and so they go out of business, and that hurts the entire community. So it is the intent of the federal government and both parties to allow these people to live in the United States. Most of them work hard, very hard, and they're reliable, and they're good people. There's bad ones too. We hear all about that, and that's unfortunate, but the pickings are better in the United States than they are in Mexico. I had a friend from Mexico go to Las Vegas, and he met with a friend of mine there, and they were discussing this illegal problem. And he says, the fellow from Mexico said, and he's an attorney, he's about 40 years old, and he said, we're happy about it because the people who left the country were uneducated, unemployed, or unemployable, and it's really relieved us of a great burden. And I know how the United States feels about it, but that's really the bottom line. And he's right. And it was just like taking a basket full of people and then just dumping them in the United States. So that's the intent of the U.S. That's a reaction, probably from the average Mexican, that it happened, and we're happy about it because those people really weren't movers and shakers in society. Now, as far as supplying weapons by the United States government, and it was by order of the president and others at high levels to try to pull some kind of a caper where they'd buy guns, give them to the bad guys, and the bad guys would use them. And they would blame, this is the bottom line, not having gun control. They wanted gun control, and they thought that was a way to do it. It didn't work. And now they're approaching gun dealers who are involved with the United States government, innocently so, assisting them in getting these guns into the hands of people who then transfer them to criminals across the border. And I don't know, was there 2,500 weapons involved? And I think that was the number. But it's not good. And when you have politicians in your country who are a bunch of jackasses and want to evade the law in doing those kind of things, you got to get rid of them. In other words, you got to get them out of office. I mean, what they did was treasonous, truly.
Bob, I think it's even deeper than that, because the information that I've accumulated over the years with Operation Watchtower, which ran in conjunction with the Iran-Contra, drugs for guns thing, is our governments, our CIA and probably our FBI are in on the major drug smuggling here. These are the people the drug smugglers we were providing arms to were started probably and controlled by our own CIA or Mossad.
Well, I personally have never heard of, in the United States and Mexico, the Mossad being involved. The only time I can remember was about 5 or 6 years ago. A Jewish family was kidnapped in Mexico City, and they put up some sort of demand from the family. And obviously they were wired in Israel, and Israel sent over a team of men who went in and to confront these kidnappers, killed every one of them, and recaptured the family unharmed. And it's a good example of don't screw with Jews in Mexico because we're going to come and get you. And that's a real incident. That really happened.
Michael Harari was the Mossad agent working for Manuel Noriega. Manuel Noriega was in partners with George Bush, and George Bush was CIA director. He used our special forces to build the radio guide towers, and Michael Harari met the planes, along with Hunt from CIA. So they were both in on it. And I was told one time that the KGB had infiltrated the FBI to the extent, or the CIA to the extent, that they were practically the same agency. And I would say that's probably the case with the Mossad and CIA.
Well, wasn't Mr. Harari liquidated?
No, he's still running in this Al-Qaeda operation in Libya, as far as I can tell.
Is that right?
Yes, sir. I'll be.
I'll be darned. I hadn't followed that closely. I know who he is. I know he was working with Noriega. I was thinking in terms of Mexico, but
well, they move him around.
The book Compromise really covers that very well.
Yes.
During the 80s.
Terry Reid, I know personally, and we've met and drank in the same bars with him and Hemingway.
Hemingway, huh? Well, that means you had to meet him down in Cuba.
Well, I was in I was in Bimini, where he'd been, one of the bars there, and the Keys. I wrote 2 novels about some of my adventures in the Florida Keys, in Miami.
You know, it's interesting. I lived in Florida for, I don't know, about 8 years, and I never went to the Keys. And I wasn't all that far away. It was probably, let me think, 2.5 hours away maximum. But I never, I had never had any reason to go down there. But I did go to Cuba.
I had to go. That's interesting. I haven't been to Cuba. I would have liked to known more about that. Was Castro the bad guy or the good guy? I mean,
Who knows? You're not going to know until he dies, and maybe we'll never know. You know, he's a subscriber to my publication.
Is he? All right.
Yeah. And I've been down there and looked at the museums and the city, and people are very nice.
We can travel there now. I mean, can Americans travel to Cuba now?
No, it's illegal.
Okay.
And but anyway, where I am, they can't find me, so I'm not worried about it. And if they do find me, they better be having inoculations for lead poisoning.
Now, tell me, I've got people that'll be coming on and talking about Libya here. I think Gordon Duff from Veterans Today will be on my show, and with Harari there, the fingers are being pointed at Israel, but what's the situation with Libya now? There's a little piece out, a little film out on Libya. I think I've got it right here on my blog TV site. That says in 1951 Libya was the poorest country in the world, and after Gaddafi got into power, they now give the residents a married couple $50,000. They got 16 cents a gallon gasoline, and they painted a really rosy picture on them until NATO comes in and bombs the place. Which is the propaganda? Which is the truth, Bob? What's going on?
Well, I know that they bombed the heck out of anything that was worth anything. They blew up all of their facilities for making piping and construction from the water pipelines, and they blew them up too. There was no logical reason why any sane person would do such a thing. And I don't know what was behind that, but I do know that the man running the operation, whose name I've heard about 25 times and I can't remember, he lived in Virginia for 20 years and was working for the Central Intelligence Agency. And so he's running the show, and the Al-Qaeda and Taliban are all people who have been trained or and under the control of the U.S. government and the MI6, which is the British government. And they were led by the SAS and Special Forces from the United States and Navy SEALs. That's how they were successful. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have been. And so that's the groundwork. And then they wanted the 4 water aquifers. I can understand why. And the oil inventory is the second largest in the Middle East, and it's the best oil in the world, or close to it. And the reason they kicked him out of his position, which they allowed him to keep for some years, because he wanted a gold dinar, and a dinar backed by gold, and he didn't want to join AFRICOM, which was a sweetheart deal for the takeover of all the resources in Africa by the neocons, and probably the British as well, the new American century. There was an integral part of their plan for the Middle East and then Africa. There also is $100 billion in round figures in their sovereign wealth fund, 60% in Europe, 40% in the U.S., that was frozen, and now they find there's a lot of money missing, like billions. And of course it was stolen. And on top of that, I think the figure is 148.8 tons of gold, and I don't know whether the invaders, the rebels, the agents of the CIA have the gold, or whether Mr. Gaddafi took it out in the desert and buried it. I don't know. But those are the things that they were after. They wanted to rape the country, loot everything, kill as many people as possible. That's why they were bombing civilian targets, to try to erase as many people as possible. It's just another classic.
Well, that's exactly what they made us do in Iraq, isn't it? And we're probably doing the same thing in Afghanistan. And it's kind of interesting, I went down to Bisbee and to Tombstone in Arizona yesterday, and as I was pulling into past Fort Huachuca, I saw the strangest craft. I almost thought it was a UFO at first, but it wasn't. It was a Predator. It was one of those remote-controlled Predator planes. So we got them right here. I mean, they're flying them right here over American.
Well, I'll tell you a big secret, and I don't know whether you know this or not. I work for the NSA, National Security Agency, via Army Counterintelligence, and we had a contingent there from 1954 onward at Fort Huachuca.
Repeat that, please.
From 1954 onward, the NSA, via the National Security Agency, the National Security Agency had a presence in Fort Huachuca, and it was under the Army Security Agency, which I was involved in. And that contingent at that base has been there since 1954. Whether they still are or not, I don't know, but they were there, because I knew everything that went on in the agency that we were in.
Bob, reading history, reading Alexander Solzhenitsyn, reading Ezra Pound, it seems that what's happening in the United States is exactly what happened in Russia, and that led to the starving of 10 million people in the Ukraine. are we looking at that kind of situation in the United States now?
I think it's part of their plan. You know, the government is corporatist fascistic in nature. That's that form of socialism. The corporation is telling government what to do. And that was the same thing that they had in Germany and Italy during the early 1930s. As far as the business is starving the population, that's on the way. And that will be part of it. They want to get rid of the useless eaters. That's why they fiddled around with the debt extension here this past month, something that could have been settled in 15 minutes. They wanted to use it as a vehicle to affect austerity. And there were two things they were after. Number one, the formation of what is called the Super Congress. The proper name for it is the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction, which is part of the Budget Control Act of 2011. And that is similar to the Star Chamber, which existed in the 13th century in England, which was neutralized by the Magna Carta. And it was also used in the form of the Politburo in Russia during the reign of the communists. And it is almost an exact duplicate of the Enabling Act of 1933, which the National Socialist Party pushed through in Germany, which brought Adolf Hitler to power as a dictator. And the intention is the same here. A very strong, centralized, dictatorial government. Now this committee of 12 plus the president bypasses Congress. And when they make laws up, they send the laws over to the House and Senate, and it's an up and down vote. They can't debate, they can't amend, and they can't filibuster. You either vote for it or you don't. And that's why they're bypassing Congress and making the legislation among these 12 people who are controlled by the corporate interests. And it also makes the President of the United States a dictator, and it neutralizes the United States Constitution. Now that's what they were after in that aspect of the extension of the Budget Control Act of 2011. The other item, where are all the cuts for $1.5 trillion going to come from? Guess where? The chopping up of Social Security and Medicare. Why? They want the old people dead. They're useless eaters. They've served themselves into society. They've done their job. You get rid of them, just like Soylent Green.
That's right.
That's what that's all about. Where do you read about that? Nowhere. Why? Because newsletter writers, journalists, media journalists, and radio and television, they don't know anything from a hole in the ground. But that's what they're up to.
Bob, I've said this is a war. I'm actually leaning towards this being the armor. This century, in this century, we've killed more people than in all of the past history of the world. And this is maybe we are already in Armageddon, and the press just forgot to tell us about it. You think?
It's possible, but I do know that in the final analysis, for economic and financial reasons, or euthanasia in respect to population, it is definitely going to happen. Definitely. It'll be part of the takedown of the world society to force them to accept this world government. And we know what they're doing. We know who's doing it. And that's why I spend 40 hours a week on the radio, as my broadcasts go all over the world. My first two emails this morning at 3:30 this morning were from Germany. And then the next two were, one was from Greece and the other one was from Thailand. And it goes on and on. We are reaching people. They are finding out who's to blame and how they can combat them. And we are doing that. And it's getting difficult and more difficult for the powers behind the scenes to function. And Brzezinski warned them 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago, and then not too long ago, that you guys better get on your horses, because if you don't move fast, you're not going to be able to implement the program that we have set forward to rule the world. That's what this is all about.
There's this country was founded fighting the New World Order of its day. The sun never sets on the English Empire. You know, I've also asked myself, Bob, and my listeners, I'm asking you now, you know, who won the Cold War? What was the Cold War all about? We built up nuclear weapons in 2 countries, you know, and there's no reason to have that many nuclear weapons. Who made all the money off of the nuclear? Who's making all the money off of the depleted uranium, the nuclear bombs that are stored over there and underneath the mountain there in Albuquerque at Kirtland Air Force Base? You know, who made all the money off of that? What's the reason for that? I mean, why build weapons if we're not going to use them?
The same people made all the money off it with the military-industrial complex. During the Cold War, right at the height of the Cold War, I was a spy for the United States. And I know how it went. And it was the greatest scam in history. I mean, it was a make-believe deal. I mean, everybody went through the motions. There were certain things I could do and couldn't do. I mean, I can remember I couldn't, when I was in Germany, I couldn't go to Berlin. And not, you know, unless I was officially flown in a U.S. airplane. I couldn't go on the ground. They wouldn't allow that. They were afraid the Russians would capture us and find out what we knew. And so, you know, after thinking the whole thing through, I came to the conclusion that what we were doing was a terrible waste of time. And it was one of the reasons I didn't stay with the National Security Agency or the Central Intelligence Agency, because I knew it was a bunch of foolishness. It was a make-believe Cold War.
Create the enemies, and create an enemy of significant power in order to keep the other regimes in line. I mean, play both sides, sell to both sides. I don't really care who wins or not. Now, people are asking me on the chat room, do you think we will go into Syria? And what about chemical weapons? Would he use chemical weapons? What about, well, let me toss both of these things in. How about Syria and how about Iran? I mean, my God, we had Sarah Palin, the darling of the Tea Parties, calling for war with Iran. They want a global war. I mean, this is World War III that they're launching that was predicted by Albert Pike, isn't it, Bob?
Right, and I think you can rightly and easily say that the situation with Iran can be a war at any moment. And it's been that way for some time. And it will happen when they're ready for it to happen. As far as Syria is concerned, Russia would have to back off and abandon their naval base there in order for American or NATO troops to go in there. And evidently they haven't made a deal with the Russians yet. Or the Russians have said,